Family dinners at the Reynolds home had always been a test of patience, but tonight felt different. I sat quietly at the end of the mahogany table, absently nudging roasted carrots around my plate while my older sister Julia held court as usual. And then I told the client that our firm is the #1 advertising agency in Boston. Julia said, swirling her glass of Chardonnay with the confidence of someone who never tasted failure. Being creative director at Stewart & Brooks really opens doors. Mom practically glowed. That's my brilliant daughter. Always knew you'd do amazing things. Dad chimed in, his voice thick with pride. I smiled faintly, remembering the countless dinners over the past 4 years, Julia's endless victories, my parents' relieved glances, and their unspoken question. What about Avery? What about you? Avery. Julia finally turned her attention toward me, her smile too polished to be genuine. Still dabbling in that little freelance thing? Just working on a few projects? I replied, my tone neutral. In reality, I was thinking about the acquisition papers I'd signed that very morning. Oh, sweet Avery! Julia sighed dramatically, shaking her head like a tragic heroine. It must be tough not having a real career at 32. You know, she added, her voice dripping with false generosity, I could put in a word for you at Stewart & Brooks. Maybe start you off in the mailroom. Dad cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. Julia? No? Really? Julia pressed on. I want to help. Poor thing, still struggling after all this time. Remember when you said you were going to revolutionize digital advertising? She laughed, tossing her perfectly styled hair over one shoulder. How's that working out? Before I could answer, Julia's phone rang. She glanced down and straightened immediately. Sorry, work call. She stood, her tone shifting to professional authority. Julia Reynolds speaking. The room fell silent. We could all hear the voice on the other end. Ms. Reynolds, the new owner, wants to meet you first thing Monday morning. Julia blinked. The owner? But Mr. Stewart's in London this week. No, ma'am. The new owner. The paperwork was finalized this morning. Stewart & Brooks has been acquired. Julia froze. Acquired by who? I rose slowly, sliding my chair back with deliberate calm. That would be me. The entire room went still. Julia's phone slipped from her manicured fingers, clattering onto her plate with a sharp thud. What her voice cracked as her flawless composure crumbled. What did you just say? I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and handed it across the table. There, in bold black letters, was the headline on every business newsfeed: Tech innovator Avery Reynolds acquires Stewart & Brooks in $420 million deal. Julia stared at the screen, her lips trembling. Mom's hand shook so hard she nearly dropped the wine bottle. Dad just looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Now, I said calmly, reclaiming my seat. Who wants dessert? Innovative digital solutions. My little freelance thing, I said, my tone calm but firm, acquired Stewart & Brooks this morning for $420 million. The sound of metal on china echoed as Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad leaned forward, fumbling for his reading glasses, as he stared at the acquisition papers like they were written in another language. This is impossible, Julia said, her voice rising an octave. Stewart & Brooks is Boston's largest ad agency. You couldn't possibly have the resources. I met her gaze without flinching. Actually, IDS has been the silent force behind some of the highest-performing digital campaigns for the past 2 years. Those projects I've been working on, major contracts with Fortune 500 companies. Julia's face flushed pink, but I would have known she insisted. I'm the creative director. You're the creative director of traditional media, I corrected gently. The digital division reports directly to corporate. You never asked who was behind those campaigns, did you? Dad's eyes scanned the acquisition papers again, his jaw tightening as he hit the last page. Avery, these numbers. Would you like to see the quarterly reports I offered, pulling my phone from my pocket? We've grown 300% year over year. That revolutionary ad platform I developed, I continued tapping through financials. Turns out big companies pay a premium for guaranteed results. Julia snatched the papers from Dad and skimmed them frantically. Her manicured nails trembled against the thick pages. This This has to be a joke. You've been living in that tiny apartment, driving that old car, living below my means, I said evenly, reinvesting everything back into the company. While you were buying designer clothes and upgrading to luxury cars, I was building something. Mom's hand brushed mine, her eyes glassy with disbelief. Avery Grace Reynolds? Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked softly. Every time I tried to explain, Julia would talk over me about her latest promotion or her corner office. As if on cue, Julia's phone buzzed violently on the table. Notification after notification flashed across the screen. She stared at it in horror, her breath coming in shallow bursts. The announcement just went company-wide, I explained. They're probably all wondering who Avery Reynolds is and how she managed to buy the firm. This isn't fair, Julia whispered, her voice cracking as she gripped her phone. I've worked there for 8 years. I earned my position, and you can keep it, I assured her. I'm not here for revenge, Julia. The company needs talented, creative directors. But maybe now you'll understand that success doesn't always come with designer labels or a corner office. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Mom stood abruptly, muttering something about needing more wine. Dad remained seated, his eyes darting back to the documents, his lips moving as he repeated numbers under his breath. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. Not because of the deal, but because they finally saw me. If this twist caught you off guard, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens when Julia walks into the office on Monday. Julia sat frozen, her plate of roasted vegetables untouched, as notifications kept buzzing on her phone. Each vibration seemed to rattle her composure a little more. Monday morning, I said, cutting through the silence. 9 a.m. Sharp! I'll be addressing the entire company. You can't just walk in and change everything. Julia finally managed her voice tight with restrained panic. We have systems, protocols, client relationships. I pulled out my tablet, opening a sleek presentation. You mean like the Thompson account? The one you're about to lose because their Gen Z engagement is plummeting. Her head snapped up. How did you... I've had full access to company data for the past month during acquisition due diligence, I explained calmly. Your traditional campaigns are solid, Julia, but they're not connecting with younger audiences. That's why Thompson has been meeting with other firms. We have a pitch with them next week, she said quickly, almost desperately. I know. And I'll be there, I replied, scrolling to another slide. Along with the team that increased client engagement by 175% across digital platforms last quarter. Dad finally looked up from the acquisition papers, his voice low and shaky. Avery, these profit margins, they're unprecedented. That's because we don't just create ads. I said, my voice steady but proud. We built an AI-driven platform that predicts consumer behavior and adjusts campaigns in real time. Those little projects I was working on, I glanced at Julia. They were live tests, refining our algorithm with some of the biggest global brands. Mom returned from the kitchen carrying a bottle of Pinot, her hands trembling as she poured. But sweetheart, all those nights you came to dinner exhausted, worried about paying rent. I was reinvesting every penny into development, I said softly. Living in that cramped apartment meant I could hire the best engineers. Driving that old Civic meant I could acquire cutting-edge servers. Julia's phone buzzed again, harder this time. She glanced down and went pale. The CEO of Thompson just emailed me, she whispered. He wants to discuss the ownership change. They've been quietly testing our platform through one of their subsidiaries, I revealed. Their engagement jumped 200% in 3 months. Julia's lips parted speechless. That's why they're really meeting next week to move their entire $50 million account to us. That's huge, she breathed. We're projecting closer to $80 million with full digital integration, I corrected. And that's just the start. I leaned back, watching her process every word. Remember last month when you laughed about my trip to Silicon Valley? I was meeting with tech giants about deploying our AI across their ad networks. Dad gripped his wine glass, knuckles white. All this time, while we worried you were falling behind, I was building an empire, I said simply, just not the kind that looked impressive at family dinners. Julia shot to her feet, her chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. I need some air. Sit down. Julia, I said, my voice calm but firm. There's more you need to hear. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself back into the chair. Her confidence drained. Shoulders slumped. Starting Monday, I continued sliding my tablet closer to her. Stewart & Brooks becomes part of IDS Global. We're restructuring into 3 specialized divisions: traditional media, digital innovation, and AI development. Each one needs a strong leader. Julia's head jerked up, her eyes flashing with something between shock and hope. You're good at what you do, I acknowledged evenly. Your traditional campaigns win awards for a reason. That's why I'm offering you the chance to lead that division. Her lips parted, but I didn't stop. If I added, you can accept that you'll be reporting to your little sister. The silence that followed was almost deafening, broken only by the relentless buzz of phones as the news exploded across industry feeds. Why Julia's voice cracked as she finally spoke. After everything I've said to you, why offer me anything? I met her gaze steadily. Because unlike you, I don't measure success by how many people I can look down on, I said softly. I measure it by how many people I can lift up, even the ones who never believed in me. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, her voice trembling. Your father and I? We should have supported you more. You supported Julia because her success was easier to understand. I replied gently. Corner offices and glossy magazines make sense. Algorithms and AI don't. I get it. I leaned forward, voice firm but calm. But maybe now you see why I kept saying the future of advertising isn't in billboards or full-page spreads. It's in predictive AI and real-time adaptation. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the message from my executive team. Press release goes live in 5 minutes. Major tech outlets are already asking for interviews. Julia stared at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. All those times I offered to help you get an entry-level job. You were already running a company bigger than ours. Ironic, isn't it? I smiled faintly. While you were offering me a mailroom position, I was negotiating to buy your entire firm. Dad cleared his throat, his voice thick. Avery, we've been so wrong. Yes, I said softly, but that's in the past. Right now, I need to know if Julia Reynolds is ready to be part of the future. I met her eyes unwavering. Monday morning, I announced the new structure. I need an answer before then. Tears shimmered in her eyes as her voice broke. All these years, I thought I was better than you. You were better at playing the old game, I said, leaning back. But I was busy changing the rules. So what's it going to be, Julia? Will you adapt? Or should I start interviewing for division chief? At that moment, the press release hit every major business network. All our phones buzzed at once, lighting up the table like fireworks. Julia snatched hers up first, her manicured nails clinking against the screen. Her lips moved silently as she read the headline aloud. Tech prodigy Avery Reynolds acquires Stewart & Brooks in $420 million deal. Revolutionary AI platform poised to transform advertising industry. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and surreal. Julia slowly set the phone down, her perfectly composed face cracking at the edges. I'll need to see the reorganization plans. I reached into my leather briefcase and pulled out a sleek folder. Already prepared, I said, sliding it across the table. Including your new compensation package. Her eyes flickered with something close to fear, then widened in disbelief as she scanned the figures. This is triple my current salary. Success pays well, I said simply, my tone even. Especially when you're on the right side of innovation. Mom pushed back her chair abruptly and began stacking dishes with trembling hands. I'll make coffee, she murmured. I think we all need it. Make it strong, I suggested lightly, pulling out another stack of documents. Because we're going to be here a while, Julia needs to understand our new direction before Monday's announcement. As Mom retreated into the kitchen and Dad continued poring over the acquisition papers, his brow furrowed so deeply it looked carved in stone. Julia finally looked at me. Really looked at me. How did you do all this without anyone knowing? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back in my chair, allowing a small, measured smile. By understanding something you never did, dear sister. True power doesn't come from telling the world how successful you are. It comes from being successful while they're too busy underestimating you to notice. Before she could respond, the room erupted with a chorus of buzzing notifications. All our phones lit up again. Julia glanced down at hers, her face draining of color. Stock prices, she stammered. They're already moving. After hours trading, I confirmed. Stewart & Brooks is up 40% on news of the acquisition. She swallowed hard. An IDS Global making headlines, I said smoothly. Our IPO announcement just went live. Monday afternoon after the merger announcement, we're going public. Initial valuation $2.8 billion. The sharp crash of ceramic breaking came from the kitchen. Mom had dropped a coffee cup. Maybe we should switch to decaf, I called out lightly. Then turning back to Julia, I locked eyes with her. Because we have a lot to discuss before Monday morning. I continued, my voice dropping to a deliberate, steady cadence. And Julia, that moment, it's coming sooner than you think. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent while they underestimated you, or would you have played the long game like I did? If you've read this far, I need your voice. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think of my choice. Was I right to offer Julia a role in the company after everything she said to me, or would you have walked away and let her face the consequences? Hit subscribe if you believe that quiet perseverance can be louder than any brag. Join me for the next chapter, because trust me, what happens in that boardroom on Monday will shock everyone, even Julia. And here's my advice. Do you never measure your worth by the size of someone else's applause. Success doesn't always look glamorous while you're building it. Sometimes it looks like late nights, worn-out cars, and a tiny apartment while everyone else is flashing their titles and designer labels. But those sacrifices, they compound into something extraordinary if you keep going. So if you're grinding through a season where no one seems to understand your vision, remember this: you don't need validation to be valuable. Let your work speak for itself. Let the results be the loudest voice in the room. And when the time comes, when you finally take that big leap, make sure you do it with grace, not vengeance. Because real power isn't about proving people wrong. It's about creating something so undeniable that even your biggest doubters have no choice but to respect it. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and most of all, keep building quietly. Your moment is coming.